Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. And General, I guess we have some good economic news for the state of Rhode Island. We now know that Rhode Island law enforcement agencies are getting $230 million from the Google forfeiture. The question is, how are they going to spend that cash? And basically, it's agencies that participated in this investigation are getting some of the money. It all had to do with the distribution of online ads from Canadian pharmacies. Talk a little bit about that.
I think that the whole thing is that there are parameters on the distribution of the money, but in essence it had much to do with those agencies and those organizations that were part of the overall investigation that it ultimately ended up in a case where Google had to reimburse particular entities. In the case of Rhode Island, the state police and several towns and cities and the National Guard were the recipients of that money. The parameters I talked about had much to do with how they're going to use it. The cities and towns may be able to use it other than for personnel cost to build perhaps a new fire station or a new police station, or the state police, Colonel O'Donnell is looking at possibility of constructing a municipal police academy, which would be participative by several cities along with the state. The Guard can only use the money for information and intelligence gathering in a fusion cell. So I think that's basically what we're talking about. Good to have the money, but certain parameters are on it.
Well, East Providence and North Providence are involved. Basically, the Canadian pharmacies were illegally selling prescriptions to American consumers, and that is how it all came about. North Providence Mayor Charlie Lombardi, it was kind of funny the way he was talking about it, but I guess he invested about $640,000 into this program, and he's getting back, obviously, millions, and he said he would do that at any time. So this is something that really they did not expect.
You're right.
Or at least that amount.
Right. Now, there's an analogy to be made, too, on how you get distribution money for such things as investigations on drug trafficking and other narcotics and things that were taken by the law enforcement agencies. That money is turned into, obviously, assets that are given back to the community. The Guard doesn't participate in that because it's not considered to be a law enforcement entity. But for this particular purpose, they are considered to be part of the information gathering and very much part of the lawsuit that Google had to pay money back into the community for.
All right, General, the numbers, for example, East Providence, North Providence, and the Attorney General's office will each get $60 million. State Police, they get $45 million, and the Guard would get $5 million. Now, you're talking about the parameters. Each city and town and each organization or agency gets to decide what they want to do with it. It's not, they all have to do the same thing.
That's correct, within the parameters. For instance, you can say you can't spend it for personnel. That's applicable to all of them. You can't spend it for some other consideration that doesn't benefit the furtherance of their mission. That's the end of the perimeter. But it's something in between, like any grant. You could put it in the same category as a grant. There are certain parameters that you have to stay within. Each town and city may spend it differently, providing they stay within the overall parameters of how the money is distributed to that particular town or city. The
State Municipal Police Academy that you're talking about here, it's obviously for training. It's training for new and veteran officers too?
Mainly new officers, but perhaps it could be used for veterans that be able to come back and a new system comes into place, new priorities, new legal parameters that they must have to follow, but mainly for new recruits coming in. And right now that takes place at the CCRI campus in Lincoln, and I've been there on many occasions talking to those kids as part of the 100 Club. That would be replaced by a new municipal police academy from this money. That's at least the program.
Is there a real need for a new facility?
Absolutely, I do believe so. Right now they're sharing a facility at CCRI, and it really has outgrown their the capacity that they do need.
Now, you know, Mayor Lombardi, staying on that topic for a second, there's always been talk about putting a new police and fire headquarters in North Providence. Actually, they tried to buy the Chinese restaurant that was right in front to expand, and that didn't work. So obviously he has the cash. He also wants to use it, some of it for maybe supplementing the pension fund. That could be a red flag, right? I
think so. I'm not sure, but I think that if it's tied to personnel to some way, that may be a red flag. It may be allowed, but I think right now my initial response to it would be that it could not be used for that because it has to do with pay and it has to do with benefits and entitlements, which normally is the responsibility of the town and city through its normal budget process. And the same would be applicable to the Guard. You cannot use money that you get under these parameters to supplement or supplant existing requirements, which are normally budgetary requirements. So you can't take this and put new police officers on or pay overtime. Or I don't believe it may be entitled to pension, covering the pension requirements. It may not be. I'm not sure of that one.
You know, General, the last big windfall I can remember was probably the tobacco settlement, and you know, there were a lot of people who said that we just wasted that money away. Because of the restrictions here, that won't take place this time around?
I think you're right, because there are specific restrictions. In the case of the tobacco money, in the case of the lead paint money, I don't think they were the kind of parameters we're talking about here. Those monies went into the general fund in the state, and consequently, they were lost somewhere along the line. So I know this money will not go into the general fund. At least that's the way I'm reading it, and that's the way I understand it. It'll go to a particular community for a specific reason within certain parameters to ensure that they can continue this mission in the future. You
know, there's going to be some type of an argument down the road here because many municipalities are seeing cuts in police and fire just because of the budget situation. Now that you get bringing money in, that's going to open up some discussion that, you know, we can put more police officers back on the street now, or at least pay their salaries.
Well, you would think so, but once again, that's not intended to satisfy that. It's intended to ensure that we continue the mission that these several departments were engaged in through the Attorney General's office and through the U.S. Attorney, that if we got money back, it would have to fill the requirements to sustain the programs that they were engaged in. And those towns and cities that didn't participate, or other agencies that didn't participate, would certainly not be entitled to that money.
And I'm sure at this point now they wish they participated. Yes. Let's talk about Massachusetts real quickly, Jen. We got a couple more minutes. Governor Deval Patrick has appointed an interim head for the National Guard there. The leader was accused of rape some 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
And I know you know
I know him personally, and you know, I certainly have reservations. But I think it makes a point that you can have somebody come forward from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. The impact that has, even though it's not substantiated at this particular point, has far-reaching impact on his being replaced, at least on, you know, a temporary basis, and that could be for a long time. But when you appoint an interim commander, as is the case here, you lose the ability to sustain whatever authority you had for perhaps a couple of years. So it's unlikely, even though he's found and he's acquitted, it will have a tremendous effect on his career should he be required to be retained at some point in the future. It will have an impact on him.
Even though the allegations are 30 years old, did the governor have to remove him?
He didn't, but I think that was a wise move, because what you don't want is to have somebody in a position of authority where you have the responsibility to ensure that they're not committing any kind of a violation of, especially a felony, and in this particular case, rape. You can't have someone accused of that, and you can't have some indication that it would be substantiated and continue to have him the responsibility to be in charge of that organization. So I think he made the right decision here, but it has a far-reaching impact.
All right, and finally the General got to take a little vacation last week. You got to go to Italy, and you got to go to the Vatican. You got up close and personal, I guess, with the Pope,
yeah,
too.
We did, about 10 feet away from the Pope, and that was just an amazing experience. But I think a special shout-out to people in Fornelli and Canala and other parts of our family heritage. It was just amazing to be there, and a special thank you for accommodating us. It was a good time.
You know, General, I was amazed because we covered the Pope when he came to Yankee Stadium, and the security that surrounds him. Now, you get the security because he's coming into another country, but security's beefed up at the Vatican, too.
Absolutely. You know, what I saw was a lot of security in the perimeter of St. Peter's Square and in the immediate vicinity of him. But he was not in the glass-covered vehicle. It was totally open. He made his way through the crowd, which was amazing to me, considering that even though there was security on the perimeter, up and close, there wasn't. But I think they have enough security to understand that when there's a threat, or at least a perception of a threat, they wouldn't do that. So I think it was pretty straightforward that they would allow him to traverse through the crowd itself. But tremendous experience, once in a lifetime for me.
I know a lot of people, Bishop Tobin mentioned this too, when he saw him, he thought he looked frail. You thought the same thing?
He did. Certainly he looked very frail. He needed several people to help him go from one place to another. His voice was somewhat weak, but still he was just a beautiful person to be in the company of. I certainly didn't get a personal audience, but I was close enough to reach out and touch him, which I did.
It's amazing that all that food, you didn't gain like 20 pounds. General, thanks for your thoughts.
Next week.
Okay. Thanks for watching.